very warm welcome from my side and good morning to all of you. I would like today to take you on a brief journey. We are looking back already to a couple of decades of trying to get the public sector to adopt open source software. It has been an on and off relationship and I think sometimes pretty tough love. You see here some headlines from the start of this century. It says like, Linux for the public sector is unstoppable. We expect a surge of migrations in 2003 and 2004. Linux is on the way to become the global software for public servants. And the Ministry of Justice is piloting an open source desktop. The arguments were pretty straightforward from the beginning, like public money should be spent on public goods. There were also the obvious security benefits of open source software. Politicians wanted to limit vendor lock-in and the creation of a monoculture. And for sure, the arguments for a cost reduction and supporting local SMEs were in the room. So in the past 2 decades, there were many efforts. Some were successful, some were not, to establish the use of open source solutions in the German public sector. Most prominently Linux, the city of Munich, migrating to open source software, and the Auswärtiges Amt, which is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Courageous efforts, alas, unsuccessful in the long run. Overall, no matter the high hopes at the start of the century, nothing really changed regarding public procurement. A lot of talking about open source, very little investment. Then the whole topic gained traction again in 2019 when a large study conducted by PwC published numbers on the dependencies of federal administration on proprietary software. It said that 96% of German federal government agencies use Microsoft Office and Microsoft Windows. This was matched by other data, like around 80% of the virtualization solutions used by the federal government are from VMware. And 75% of federal administration data is managed with Oracle solutions. These numbers describe a massive dependency of the public sector on proprietary US technologies that lead to severe consequences, the first one being cost explosion. Current IT framework agreements of the public sector with major suppliers total 13.6 billion euro, mostly with US-based companies. One agreement with Oracle alone already accounts for 4.6 billion euros. And these figures don't just represent a cost, they represent a massive loss of control in public administration on data, on processes, and in decision-making. Heavily highlighted, for example, by Microsoft starting to force institutions into their cloud instead of being able to run their products on-premise. Since these numbers got published, we have seen a couple of highly encouraging developments in Germany. Under the label of digital sovereignty, strategies have been created by 2 consecutive governments, first CDU and SPD, and then with a real commitment to open source in their coalition contract, the past Ampel coalition, to end these dependencies and regain agency, to have a choice, to retain the ability to switch between software solutions seamlessly, to be free to adapt, to design and control its own IT landscape, and to have a voice, to demand influence over the operation of its software, remaining able to act. And it was properly understood that open source software meets these expectations of digital sovereignty by ensuring independence from vendors, enabling seamless switching without lock-in, by allowing the public sector to control its IT solutions and their operations fully, and by offering adaptability to tailor the software and its operation to specific needs. Now, what the public sector needs are user-friendly open source alternatives with clear exit scenarios and migration paths to them. It needs customizable software solutions adaptable to operational needs. And it needs guidance and expertise to build competence in the public sector and empower it for these transitions. And overall, a couple of steps have been since taken into the right direction. We have even seen the establishment of laws asking the administration to at least prioritize open source software in procurement. And ZenDiS was created. The German IT Planning Council established ZenDiS as the Center for Digital Sovereignty in Public Administration in 2022. The federal and state governments have tasked ZenDiS with addressing software dependencies and empowering public institutions at all levels, federal, state, and municipal, to transition to open source solutions. Because support is needed in many areas to give the public sector access to and ensure the successful implementation of open source software. ZenDiS builds the essential bridges to ensure these transitions succeed. We are the trusted partner from the public sector and for the public sector, providing secure procurement, operations, and capacity building. After 1 year in operation, we can also showcase some pretty concrete outcomes. Let me briefly look at our platform OpenCode and our flagship product OpenDesk. With OpenCode, we provide a platform that covers the entire software lifecycle and enables interaction at every stage, from identifying and procuring suitable solutions to development and reuse. This is all done collaboratively across all levels of the public sector. And today, OpenCode already features more than 5,400 users collaborating in 2,300 repositories. We also deliver alternative solutions free from vendor lock-in, tailored to the public sector needs. OpenDesk is our office and collaboration suite built on well-known open source projects like Nextcloud, Element, OpenExchange, OpenProject, XWiki, and Collabora. After its launch in October 2024, we have registered more than 1,000 requests from all over the public sector, federal, state, and municipal level, schools, universities, plus a lot of requests from the private sector as well as from other countries. We see more than 1,700 users in our piloting projects, and over 60,000 enterprise subscriptions already in use. Great efforts, I think, but these two projects remain a drop in the ocean. We are still not seeing a fully fleshed rollout of open source on all levels of the IT stack. Quite the contrary. This number shows it clearly. Only 0.5% of federal spendings on software and related service in the last legislative period went into open source related efforts. But then things happened. With the Trump election on November 5th, 2024, things started to change at a breathtaking speed. With the world in turmoil and rule sets we believe to be stable for generations now in question, every day unravels new threats. With partnerships being called off or put at stake, dependencies are turned into geopolitical weapons. Trump acts on a simple playbook when it comes to foreign politics. Identify the weak spot on the other side, then exploit it to get what he wants. Like pressure Mexico and Canada to send border control by threatening with tariffs. Or pressure Ukraine to hand over scarce resources by threatening to withdraw military support. Or pressure the EU to stop regulations like DSA or DMA by threatening with tariffs and other responsive actions. For Germany, as well as for most European countries, the dependencies on US software solutions are a major weak spot. And I am convinced that this year we will see the Trump administration exploiting them to get something they want. And the German government will either have to comply or take on the huge effort to switch to open source solutions as quickly as possible. The dependencies on US proprietary tech solutions give the Trump administration leverage to exert political pressure by threatening to disrupt, disable, or manipulate critical IT infrastructure if Germany does not align with US interests. It also gives leverage to destabilize and spread disinformation by failing to patch security vulnerabilities or obstructing key public services, including democratic elections. They simply have the kill switch to any governmental or administrative activities. Now, what is Germany and the EU going to do about this? To discuss this question more deeply, let's first get back again to November 2024. At the same time as the Trump election, another major thing happened, this time in Germany. The government broke up. This also means that most administrative actions came to an abrupt halt, including the implementation of the government's digital strategy with its open source focus. And public spending got frozen, fiercely affecting ZenDiS. We were denied access to 34 million euro that should have been transferred to us to build up the services needed to fulfill our mission, leaving us with the projects we started with, Open Code and Open Desk. But instead of at least using the momentum on these two to gain some ground in creating digital independencies, our funds were cut by 50% on both. After the coalition breakup, very short election campaign followed, completely neglecting the threat starting to build up in the US, solely focusing on the topic of migration. And now there we are, with a strong extremist opposition in the Bundestag and the new German government-to-be finally understanding that they need to invest billions in sovereignty, from defense to infrastructure. Now, this could in fact become the 2022 moment for digital sovereignty. Back then, Germany was able to sever its dependencies on Russian gas after the attack on Ukraine, given political will and big investment. We see it happening now again, both on a German as well as the European level, with the US not being a reliable partner anymore and Russia remaining a threat to all of Europe. Huge investments are planned to become independent. What we need now in Germany as well as in Europe is to include an agenda for investments in digital sovereignty. With financial means now available to act on it, we need a plan to switch from proprietary US solutions to open source as quickly as possible. This is how it could look like. Start with focusing the new government on a sovereign digital strategy. For a new Ministry of Digital, make it its primary goal. Then ensure that this strategy is a European one. It will only succeed when acted out together with our European partners. Next, stop public spending on proprietary US technologies and then make procurement of open source software a must criteria. Create an updated overview on all proprietary US technologies used by public administration and procure or develop open source alternatives. Create migration strategies for all dependent technologies and implement them. I think this sounds pretty straightforward and probably also a bit naive, but we all know what a huge effort this will become. So Germany cannot solve these challenges alone, and we definitely should not build isolated national infrastructures. A purely national approach is too slow, too rigid, and too resource-intensive. Instead, Germany must collaborate and embrace lightweight, distributed, and federated solutions. Joining forces in European collaboration is the answer on joint open source projects being inherently international, collaborative, and decentralized. What's it going to take? I think we need the political will and decisive action. We need a joint effort on the European level and beyond, learning from global efforts like GovStack, IndiaStack, and the UN Open Source Program. We need major investments in the main strategic actors the government has, like ZenDiS and the Sovereign Tech Agency. And we need major investments in and the support of the open source ecosystem and community. We still have some weeks left before the German government establishes itself. We need to ensure that the coalition contract understands digital sovereignty as the basis for any capacity to act of the government. Because the state can only fulfill its core responsibilities, economic stability, security, sustainability, public services, and democratic processes, if it has the control over the availability, security, and operation of its IT infrastructure. Digital sovereignty must be recognized and prioritized as a national and European security imperative. So I will leave you with two asks. A local one for the Germans in the audience. Use your voice and your connections to make sure digital sovereignty and open source make it into the coalition contract and the list of projects to be funded by the special funds now set aside for defense and infrastructure. And beyond German politics, as parts of the global open source ecosystem and community, let's work together to provide alternative solutions that governments, companies, and individuals now need more than ever to regain their agency. Let's get on this journey together. Thanks so much.
Thanks for the wake-up call. Very important topic. One question I would have is, you're talking about the shifting global political landscape. And for me, open source has always been, and I've always perceived that as global collaboration. Do you think there is a danger that this global collaboration will cease to exist and we will have kind of European open source versus American open source versus Chinese open source, and we will lose the power of open source, that it in the end doesn't really matter anymore if it's open source or not, but that the silos decide what is effective and what not?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I really think that this fear is serious, and we already see that, for example, in the US, they are having large issues with open source development in China, for example. And they start sifting through GitHub and other repositories to see where Chinese contributors are in effect. So yes, this is a real challenge and a real threat to global cooperation in the open source ecosystem, which is why I always try to, when I talk to politicians and decision makers, to make them understand that only the global nature of open source software is a core element of the benefits that we are deriving from it. So it is not a solution to like set up barriers in this collaboration. It is important that we have transparency, that we have insights into the contributors, that we have security scanners and security protocols in place, all of that. But it should not lead to a situation where we set up like virtual digital borders in between, which will heavily impact the innovative opportunities of the whole ecosystem. I think that's one part of the answer. The other part is where we've last seen a real threat coming from Chinese contributors was the situation in the XC exploit. But this is, in my opinion, not solved by like setting up like borders or something. It is solved by properly investing in open source maintainership and contributors so that they will not fall for this kind of hoaxes and exploits.
Another question from the audience, and then I'm going to start reading the upvoted questions online.
Thank you very much. A really excellent talk. I wonder how you see this initiative, which sounds so important now, competing or collaborating somehow with the other initiatives that were there in terms of AI responsibility and cyber resilience. Will it be competing for funding and attention and effort, or will it somehow be complementary?
I definitely think that this needs to be complementary. So there is no cyber resilience without open source, in my opinion, for example. So I think what I rarely see, at least in German politics, is that strategy is put first. We like to think about structures. Should there be a ministry? Should there be a digital agency or whatnot? I think we need to think about strategy, and strategy needs to like have all of these topics in a coherent narrative, that you see the mutual benefits in between all of these topics, because they are there and one can't exist without the other. So I think discussing like digital sovereignty without looking at cybersecurity doesn't make any sense. Discussing cybersecurity without talking about open source doesn't make any sense. But there needs to be a joint understanding of how all of these things are interconnected, and I see a severe lack of that understanding.
So first question online, it's a long one. And feel free to chime in, of course, after. So the dependency on proprietary software is a problem in terms of funding private foreign companies with public money, as well as exposing us to vendor lock-in with geopolitical risks. A possible step towards independence is legislation to force open formats, making it possible to develop and migrate FOSS alternatives. Do you think this is a realistic first step, or is the urgency so great that open formats and free software are fundamentally intertwined in terms of solution implementation?
So I think or speaking about like the German situation, can't speak about other countries necessarily, but I think legislation is the first step, and we've already seen that in the last legislative period in Germany, that there were at least efforts like in the OZG, the Onlinezugangsgesetz, and in the e-government law to implement that priority on open source software. If we now move that one step forward, saying that this is a must criteria, this is going to change things. For sure, it can't stop there. These legislations need to be implemented. We see that in other countries, like in Switzerland. There we have the must criteria in their legislation, but still the implementation is lagging behind. So I think to be fast, it needs to be both. It needs to be the legislation, and it also needs the implementation. A couple of weeks ago, I still thought that for the new government, it is important that they set a midterm goal. Like in 10 years, we want to have a 100% open source software in the public sector. And this would like move everything into that direction, and the economy has sufficient time to switch, and German SMEs and European SMEs can switch to become open source and change their business models to that. But now we don't have 10 years anymore. We need to act now. So the implementation and the necessary practical steps need to come at the same time, and they need to come now, not in 10 years from now.
Thank you for your presentation. So, but then going to your last comment, the question is, how do we find an oracle today? Literally, how do we switch? This is going to take 10 years, probably, the change. And this is even thinking about the skills that people will need in the future. So we need to involve academia. We need to involve all agents in the society to make this happen. Even more to the level of having, and that's probably another blocker, a commercial European ecosystem that is basically providing enough support to governments, because by default, governments are conservative, so they tend to choose the less risky option.
Yeah, I think your point is very, very true, and this was why I said that my plan is probably a bit naive, but it shouldn't stop us from starting with it now, because I think only in having this clearly framed goal and a way to that, we can build up the hope to make it happen, and we can build up the strength based on that hope. As I said, I don't think we have 10 years, but in the end, we need to stop. We need to start now and then see how fast we can go. We have seen it with the topic in 2022, where Germany was able to free itself very, very quickly from the dependency on Russian gas. I think the problem at hand with the digital dependencies is larger. It is way larger. But on the other hand, we have that ecosystem that is able to work towards the solutions. And as said, it is not only in Germany, it is a global ecosystem. And if there is sufficient investment in that, and if we work together on that, I think we can make it happen in definitely less than 10 years. But we can make the major strides into that direction immediately. And like looking at the solutions, looking at the major dependencies, we have that Microsoft dependency, but OpenDesk is a usable solution. It would not cover all of the use cases, but most of them. We can switch from Windows to Linux on the desktop. This has been done for decades already. Then we have, like, to replace Oracle, we have PostgreSQL. To replace VMware, we have Proxmox. They are solutions. They just need to be put in place, and then we will learn for where the gaps are and what we need to do. But we need to start with these, like, low-hanging fruits.
We'll just follow up on this with an online question and get back. So the second most voted question is, what's the current most recommended process or set of processes for governments to start mapping their proprietary dependency? How and have you started such conversations in government departments and settings?
Yes, the answer is a clear yes, and I'm very happy about this. We call this the sovereignty check. And a main thought behind this was that with now digital sovereignty being a trending topic, we see a lot of sovereignty washing as well. So what we need to get to is a clear understanding of what we mean with sovereign IT solutions, and use a set of criteria that is developed on a fact-based on a fact basis. To then assess like an IT stack of an institution. And this is something that the German Ministry of Interior also has been working on, and there is academia that has been working on the topic, like the University of Würzburg. And together, what we are now starting is a project to put these efforts together to develop first a very lightweight set of criteria, that you can use as a self-assessment on open code and then move this into a very sophisticated set of assessments that can be used to understand the state of sovereignty, of digital sovereignty in an institution, in a set of tools, and with that, build that overview on the whole scale of IT solutions in the public sector to understand where we have the largest dependencies, whether it's still the same situation like in 2019 or whether things have changed, and also map the progress starting from there.
I have a very practical question. In the beginning of your talk, you talked about the Linux project, and I'm old enough to still remember that project. So there was the attempt of the city of Munich to switch from Windows to Linux. And I think we can all agree that this kind of failed miserably. So my 3 questions are, why did it fail? What can we learn from it? And what should we do differently this time?
Yeah. So I think why did it fail? In my opinion, was 2 reasons. One was that there wasn't sufficient emphasis put on change management and the usability of the product set up instead of the Windows client that everybody knew how to use. The learning is, or no, that was the first reason. Like not building a new setup by including the users, by making the users the focal point of the whole migration. The other reason was purely political, that the leadership changed in the city, and this new leadership just was not interested in continuing with that process. What we can learn is, given the political will, and what I just laid out is that I really hope that the political will is there now. We need to focus on the other part, like the usability, the lovability of the products in the end. This is something that we are focusing on at ZenDiS to make sure that what we are offering to the public sector is built along their needs, that we understand our users as best as we can. But it's also important for all of the open source ecosystem and community to make sure that the products are not only scratching the itch of a couple of developers, but that they are really, really usable, and they don't need to match what the users are used to. We have seen that, for example, in like Google Workspace, it is doing things quite differently than Microsoft are doing. But the tools are so usable and so helpful in helping you through your daily processes that people are just, they are not having a hard time to switch. So I think that is the major learning there. And the last question, I think, was how do we go about it? On the federal level in Germany, we will start soon in a project where we try the same thing again that has not worked for a couple of times, but I think this time equipped with all of that learning, and also I think with a lot more pressure and political will behind us. So yeah, I'm hopeful that we won't fail that time due to that.
Oh, hi. Great talk. Thank you. One question. I, for my sins, worked for government digital services in the UK for a little bit. And specifically, I worked in the area of trying to encourage open standards. We actually put in place the policy to use open document format instead of Word documents. But then everybody started using Google Cloud services, so it became kind of irrelevant, all the policies that we put in place. And how is what you're talking about going to work with cloud as well, I guess is my question.
Yeah. So I think that's a really key point now when we are talking about the political aspects in the dependencies. Because if your data is in a cloud operated by a US company, and it doesn't matter whether it is in Germany or located in Germany or somewhere else, having the cloud located in Germany provides you with a bit of more like privacy, compliance with privacy law, but still things like the Cloud Act will enable the American government to like get into the data that you have stored in that cloud. But in my opinion, the other way of like data streams is more important. It is not the data being moved out or read by foreign actors. It is the ability of the US actors to stop the cloud providers to provide patches, to provide updates, to provide security updates. So with that, they have what I call the kill switch, because then the cloud is not operable anymore in a very short time span. And this means that if that happens and all of the data is stored in a Google or Microsoft cloud, and not only the data, it's also all of the apps, all of the software, like all of the processes, everything of the activities in a government and in an administration. You just close everything down, just with being able to stop providing security and other updates. And that's, I think, is the core point here.
What's your perception on hardware? Because you haven't mentioned it at all, but at the moment you're running on foreign hardware too.
Absolutely. So that's, for me, that's a bit the creepy thing, because it is like the same problem on the same scale, but just in another area. So coming from ZenDiS, we are currently focusing on the software topic, so that's why I put the focus on that. But you're totally right, the topic of hardware, and in that case, not necessarily the dependency on US hardware, but mostly on Asian hardware, it has the same severity, and it needs to have similar answers. These are just not the ones that I am able to give at that scale.
So I know that we are at time, but thank you again, Jutta. It was a great keynote.